Hi, my name is Dr. Frederick Edward Fabella, and I will be discussing the Foundations of Quantitative Research Part 2, Your Variables. Okay, so let's begin. Well, scientific inquiry began with curiosity, as we all know. Perhaps the philosophers of old were curious about their environment, their surroundings, their universe. They wanted to make sense of the world that they lived in. Okay, so they could have been, for example, curious about the growth of a plant. Okay, and of course, this is a very basic example that we will use. Okay, so perhaps one of them asked the question, what affects its growth? Okay, and maybe they could have thought that perhaps water affects its growth. Okay, so you might want to ask that question and try to test whether your answer is true. Does water affect its growth? Okay, so research begins when you identify two things where one might affect the other. Okay, so we can refer to these two things as variables. Okay, so going back to our example, we have water and we have the growth of a plant. Now, we can try to imagine that perhaps there might be a relationship between the two, whether water affects the growth of the plant. Now, we can designate the water as variable 1, and we can designate the growth of the plant as variable 2. Okay, so you will need at least two variables to study in order to conduct a quantitative research. Okay, so we have variable 1, we have variable 2, and you might want to ask the question, does one variable affect the other? Okay. Okay, so that's the direction of the effect of one variable on the other. Now, if you have these two variables, you might want to ask further, does changing variable 1 affect variable 2? Okay, so in what sense? Okay, if you increase variable 1, the what happens to variable 2? Okay, you might want to find out. Or if you decrease variable 1, what happens to variable 2? Okay, in quantitative research, your variables must be quantifiable. That's why it's called quantitative, or measurable. It must be measurable, such that in our example earlier, the amount of water can be measured, as well as the growth rate of the plant. Okay? All right. Now, this is why it is necessary that you have valid and reliable instruments that can measure your variables. Okay. Now, in the physical sciences, we have different variables. So we have temperature, density, friction, acceleration, velocity, resistance, mass. All of these are variables that you can measure as long as you have the instrument necessary to measure them. Okay? But in the social sciences, we don't have physical variables. We have what are called constructs. Okay, so these take the form of variables such as profile, motivation, attitudes, emotional quotient, personality, self esteem, and perception. So, all of these are constructs that um, take the form of our variables when we consider research in the social sciences. Of course, we also need instruments that are valid and reliable in order to measure these constructs. Okay, so that ends my discussion on variables. If you want to stay updated with my upcoming lectures, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Prof. Eric F. Thank you very much.